your source for everything paranormal. Para X. The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Welcome to Stirring the Cauldron. Now, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Hey, merry meet everybody, and welcome to Stirring the Cauldron here on the Para X Radio Network. Tonight we're going to be talking about defensive occultism with author Robert Rubin, who's author of the book Defensive Occultism. Now, Robert started out as a practitioner of the occult and the esoteric in the San Francisco Bay Area, where he was first introduced to the practice of magic and psychic sciences early on in his life. He's a founder and creator of Mysterium Magazine, a free online digest magazine focused on the topics of New Age, paranormal, supernatural, in the Philippines, which eventually led to the formation of Mysterium Philippines, where he and his colleagues trained people in the diverse field of the esoteric and developed them to train others in their respective specialties. Since then, he was selected as one of the 4 lead paranormal investigators in the Philippines, handling topics ranging from possession to witchcraft and just about everything else in between. He's a passionate advocate of responsible teaching and application of the esoteric arts, and currently works as a professional esoteric consultant, helping people make a decision in their life by providing alternative routes and discussing potential outcomes. Robert, welcome to Stirring the Cauldron.
Thanks for having me, Marla. It's an honor to be here.
Well, thank you. It's a fascinating book. It's a fascinating topic, and I really laugh because when I posted the banner on my Facebook page,
Mhm.
big defense of occultism, somebody sent a note that said, and perfect timing too. And that led me to believe, and I don't even, I don't remember who she was, but it led me to believe that a lot of people need to know stuff about this that they really don't. Or if they do know about it, they need to learn more about it to kind of keep up and keep all the negativity and the bad stuff away. And the book, Defense of Occultism, offers the reader a way to defend themselves as well as those who they hold dear from the malicious workings of predators in the unseen world. So how big of a threat is it out there, in your opinion?
Well, if you're talking about the whole world as macrocosmically, it's a growing threat. Simply because there's so many different threats out there that we can't just say that the only thing we need to worry about are, like, example, abusers of the occult, because that's only one category. I mean, there are spirits, beings, things that existed even before humanity that are, for some weird reason or another, coming back to life now, are getting more, aggressive. Like in this country, we've got a lot of very aggressive elemental spirits. And I have a lot of people coming to me and they say, like, my family was attacked by a dwarf, which is very common here in the Philippines. And if people don't know how to remedy this or how to approach it, they'll just keep on falling victims to it. But that's only one version of the threat. I mean, you also have hauntings, you have curses. So the book just tries to overall encapsulate as many of the threats as possible and educate the readers. So yeah, it's a pretty growing phenomenon nowadays.
Well, you say in the book, and you're not pulling any punches as you go along. You're not sugarcoating anything. And you say in your book that evil exists, period.
Yes.
And the more you interact with such entities or energies, call them what you will, the more their essence will manifest in our lives. So what kind of things are there that we need to be aware of that we might not even be paying any attention to and interacting with them unwittingly?
Well, you see, nowadays, people are getting more conscious again than ever of energy, personal energy. I'm sure you know what a psychic vampire is, example. And the more thought you give into these things, the more you interact with things like, example, people who are psychically unclean, or even with the spirit world. It kind of makes more of a presence for you in that world as well. Like in the movie Constantine, all people hate it, but it's one of my favorite movies. He said a very clear, encapsulated statement, which was, you see them, they see you. Okay? And that pretty much encapsulates what I mean. Like the minute you start interacting with that world, that's it. It's just going to keep on, you're just going to keep on going further into the deep end from there. And the only real way to survive is to educate yourself. So that's pretty much my take on the topic.
Well, education is great, and I'm the big proponent, and that's one of my soapbox things about living and learning. But okay, we're dealing with people. A lot of people don't believe in any of this.
Mm-hmm.
And they, again, unwittingly, could be growing things and making things happen that they don't know about. How do you get through to those people?
All right. Now, it's like this. I don't need to believe, example, that a gun will hurt me for it to hurt me, if you know what I mean. Now, especially in this part of the world, in the Philippines, people are naturally superstitious. Like I've heard stories, and they've even investigated some cases where people who are like born again Christians, Catholics, very devout in their religion, doesn't even give a second thought into these topics. They were attacked by malignant spirits, and the first thing they do, they have this really creeped out look. It's like, why me? And they don't realize that it was something very mundane, like as mundane as chopping down a tree that had a tree spirit in it. Now they're already a victim to a spiritual attack. So just because they don't believe in it, it's no longer a credence for them to say that it's not going to hurt you. Like if another one is, if you really pissed off a genuine practitioner, you did something very heinous to them, we have to be educated and say it's not beyond them to aggressively use their magic. And if you can disbelieve all you want, it's still going to make you a victim to what they can do if they're a genuine practitioner. So the word disbelief is just losing its power nowadays totally.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's jump in, take that a little step further. Let's talk about curses because, we're people throw out curses left and right all day long, don't realize that they may be stronger than they intend or whatever. But there's two sides of the curse coin, and I've had guests talk about this before. There are people that actually throw out curses, and lots of people that believe in them. But on the other hand, people are saying, well, the one who threatens to curse really doesn't even have to go through with it, because if you tell someone you're going to curse them, you're going to give them a stomach ache, you're going to give them a headache, you're going to make them fall down or something. Here we go into a self-fulfilling prophecy. So they're saying, well, okay, well, this guy said he was going to curse me. Bang, the guy's on the ground, and the cursor did not do anything. Do you believe that people can be cursed without knowing it? And is it maybe more difficult, if they do know it, to get away from it? Because they're going to start...
I'm glad you asked me the question, Marla, because sometimes like I like to tell my students is that psychology can be the best weapon of any wizard, witch, mage, whatever. Like, I can tell a person, oh, you cut me off in line, I'm going to curse you, and I don't even need to light a single candle. And the next thing you know, the guy says he's feverish, he's dizzy. I didn't curse him. He cursed himself. You know what I mean? I just Jedi mind tricked him. Now, by explaining this to people, like, I have people come to me, oh, I've been cursed because I got a promotion that this one guy was wanting to get, and I heard he's into the arts, and he hexed me. I usually tell my clients, in most cases, magic is not that ego-driven. A real practitioner who could really do damage wouldn't want to waste their time with something so mundane. Do you know what I mean? So usually it's just assuring the person that, are you sure you're being cursed by a practitioner, or are you cursing yourself? Because you can't defend yourself from a self-curse, right, Marla? It's you do damage to yourself.
That's it.
So in that case, I tell them that unless you really did something that really pissed this person off, they usually, even if they're the grandest occultists, the more powerful they are, they won't even mind with it. You have very rare cases where, somebody will summon a demon from the Goetia just because you ate their cheeseburger. I mean, I think the person doing that is an idiot. But in most cases, a benevolent, a respectful practitioner will, in fact, just, they'd rather just give you the finger than actually go through all the trouble. And I also like to educate my readers on exactly the reality of a curse. It's like some people say, well, he gave me the evil eye. I said, why? Was he staring at you nonstop for like 45 minutes? Because maybe if he did, then I'd consider it. But if you just think he did it, lower down the paranoia a bit.
Well, you do. I mean, even you or I, and a lot of people out there who know this, still, if somebody just walks up to you and looks at you and says, I curse you, we're still going to get a little bit weird for about 30 seconds, Yeah.
I mean, that's true. That's true. I mean, any normal person would kind of get tripped out. I usually tell people that in the book, and I also tell them in my classes, that even if that did happen, if you practice good psychic or magical hygiene, you do regular banishings and cleansings, then I think that your cleansings and your defensive mechanisms will overtake the negative energy sent to you by any pseudo curse, if you know what I mean.
But that brings up a whole other topic of believing in yourself and trusting yourself, because a lot of people don't. Well, I can do it. Well, can I? We're always second guessing ourselves in the metaphysics. And so, what would you say if somebody says, well, I think I can, but, I mean, what do you tell somebody to give them that backbone and to believe in themselves?
Well, usually what I tell them is this. In my psychic development course here in Manila, the very first thing I tell my students is there's only one rule in the class, and that rule is thou shalt not doubt. Because the minute you doubt your own ability, it's useless. It's really useless. You're neutralizing whatever potential power you can have. Now, in a scenario where you think you're being cursed, you're being attacked, you just pretty much need to do it until you're confident with it. Just like with anything else. It's like, I doubt that my cooking is up to your standards, Marla. But if I keep doing it, maybe I think I can pull off something that you might like. So if you're just doing things on a very minuscule amateur level, then just keep at it. I mean, eventually you're bound to get good at it. You're bound to say, okay, I know this ritual, I know this spell in and out. It's going to become second nature to you.
Yeah, and believing in yourself is probably one of the toughest things that we all have to deal with, but also I would say one of the most important. Trusting ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you there 100%.
All right, well, let's keep on the curse thing for just one more little bit, because I think everybody at one time or another believes they've been cursed, or we even joke about it. I mean, Tim was talking earlier about the fact that his board went down and Skype was giving him a problem, and and I said, "Oh, you better put up the mirrors, light the candles," kind of thing. I mean, we're joking about it.
Yeah.
But are there any particular telltale classic signs of being cursed, or does that depend on the curse itself as to how they manifest?
Well, in my own recorded times of experiencing things happen to people, I usually like to differentiate the curses, because people think that it's all one big yucky pile called the curse. But if you've read the book, there's a difference between what I call the magical attack and the psychic attack. Mm-hmm. I've differentiated this because although they work similarly, the symptoms and the outlays are very much different. Like example, with the psychic attack, that usually happens in immediate range. Okay? You need to be right near the person who's trying to psychically attack you, or they need to have a link. And most likely, if you're psychically attacked, the damage will be internal. You'll be getting headaches, you'll be getting sickly, you'll be getting nausea, you'll be getting overstressed, high blood pressure, anything that pretty much knocks you off your rocker and makes you feel weak and lethargic. Now, with a magical attack, you could be perfectly in ship shape, feeling great, but you've got what I call Murphy's touch. Not Midas touch, but Murphy's touch. Basically, everything you touch turns to garbage. That which can't go wrong will go wrong. I mean, it could be coincidence if your girlfriend broke up with you and you lost your job at the same day. But if in all 1 week you lost your job, girlfriend broke up with you, your aunt died, your cat ran away, and your house burned down, I'd be like, dude, did you piss anyone off in my category? Because it sounds like somebody sent some bad juju your way. Mm-hmm. So the more misfortune comes your way, and it's like, it seems to be like surrounded around you, like everything you work with just seems to just fall apart, then I'm willing to bet that there's a good possibility that you may be cursed, but I don't tell that to my clients and my students right away, because that's the last thing they need to hear, if you know what I mean. You need to tell them that maybe you're just carrying a lot of negative energy that you haven't banished properly. Because the minute you tell them they're cursed, they're going to start freaking out. So you have to keep them strong. The mental state of mind is very important in overcoming these things.
So do people come to you and then you determine whether something, let's say it's a psychic attack versus a magical attack, and in that case, how do you deal with it?
Okay. Now, if you notice in the back of the book on the copy I gave you, I have a template. I don't like to just jump just because the person says, oh, my head's itching, is it a psychic attack? No. I get them as much information as I can. Sometimes it's not even a curse, believe it or not. Like I said, sometimes you could have aggrieved the spirit. What if, example, you tore down a tree that had a tree spirit in it? Or let's say, you spat on a dwarf mound, which are very popular here. It's just these small mountains that are rumored to have earth spirits in it. These things get very pissed off when you do that. And the symptoms can be very similar to a curse. Mm-hmm. So usually what I do, I try to get as much information as when the misfortune happened, when was the ailments happening, how long has it been occurring, what have been the recurring things. And based upon the information, I try to make an educated guess on the direction we may be going with. Is it a curse? Is it a hex? Are you haunted? Are you magically attacked? Are you psychically attacked? There's so many possibilities.
Mm-hmm. It takes a lot to kind of figure out, where it begins and where to take it and how to work it out.
Exactly.
So what is the most overlooked danger out there that people don't pay attention to or may not know about? I mean, we're talking about curses, and you're talking about elementals and things. There's a ton of stuff out there. Is there one particular thing that people really need to be on the lookout for?
Yes, I actually like to share this. Thank you for asking this. I'd actually say there are two. The first that I'd always warn all my clients of would be, watch out for con artists. That's usually what I tell them. Because they will play you. They will really play you, Marla, especially in this country. Oh, they'll say, oh, Lucifer himself is attacking you. And if you buy this sacred underwear for $500, it'll be gone. It's like bullcrap. No. I mean, that's the number one danger. But if you're asking me what's the second most popular danger, I'd actually say I would say passive psychic transference. Now, what is this? You need to be careful about the energy exchanges you have with individuals around you. Like, I tell them psychic attacks and psychic vampirism is probably the most documented form of, how do I say, aggression in my book, because you get it at work. You get it by being around somebody who, is really down and out and can't even control their energies. And the danger in this is if you are too exposed to psychic vampires, sometimes you can get infected by it. You could, usually when you see a psy-vamp, there's usually something wrong with them. Usually they're depressed or they're suicidal or they're emo. And too much exposure to people like this, I like to quote Robert Greene when I say, avoid the unlucky and the unhappy because it's contagious. He couldn't be more right. So I usually tell my clients, when you think that you're being psy-vamped by someone, you think somebody's sucking the goodwill out of your life, like you're hanging out with a Dementor from Harry Potter, keep your distance because that can infect you.
Mm-hmm. It's true, and there's a lot of them out there. And it's kind of too bad that people can't always suck up the goodness that's coming out of other people, too. It seems like we're more prone to get the negativity. It's just like spirits. When they're out and about, they gravitate to people who are like-minded. I mean, if they were grumpy and miserable on this earth, they're going to be grumpy and miserable over there, and they're going to find an equally grumpy and miserable person to hang out with back here.
Very true.
And I think that's the way a lot of people, I mean, you're having a bad day and you open yourself up and you let down the walls because you just don't care. You're opening up to spirits who are in that same frame of mind, which could not just be for 5 minutes. They could form an attachment, and they could be with you quite a long time, loving it and sucking the life, like you said, like a Dementor, right out of you.
Well, sometimes another thing that people tend to miss out on is that sometimes they create the spirit. Franz Barden went into detail about watching out for creating elementals, that too much emotional energy invested into one place at one time can create a astral entity that lives just to feed off that. So example, like say, if you were my wife and you and I always had a fight every day in the kitchen, every time I'd come home from work, that's energy. And the energy is never destroyed. It's just left there. And if we do this every day, that's a lot of mojo going around. Eventually, we will create a thought form of this anger. And what it will do, it will trigger future fights between you and me so that it can feed off of it. And it just lives as a leech. And some people say I'm cursed, and I say, no, you actually created a thought form because you and your wife can't take your garbage outside. You're literally putting all that concentrated energy into one area. And if you don't know how to dispel these things, they can become very detrimental to your life. Might even have to move out of your house in certain cases.
Well, there's also a chance that would follow you too, isn't there?
Well, you can. The thing is, the beauty of it is, yes, that's true, but there are means of kind of just keeping it locked up.
Mm-hmm. Let's describe what thought forms are in case there's some people out there that don't know, because sitting here talking about it, you're talking about a thought form, and then I'm envisioning, we've created this elemental, I mean, in our own mind. So let's talk a little bit about thought forms, and they're not just all bad, but give us a lowdown on thought forms.
Okay, it's a Frankenstein monster, or it's an android, in other words. And it's created on how you programmed it. So you're right. Thank you for correcting me. They're not all bad. You can actually make a happiness thought form. You can make, Franz Barden said it in Initiation to Hermetics, very possible to do this. The problem is we have the habit of making negative ones more than we do positive ones.
It's a lot easier.
Exactly. And the energy is just so much more abundant sometimes, unfortunately. So that being said, thought forms are created by psychic energy or by astral energy envisioned by an individual, sometimes even unintentionally. So the more energy you put into like this one area, this one thought, it's going to take a mind of its own, and that's your thought form. So example, if I say to myself every day in the corner of my room, I hate myself, I want to die, I'm going to create a suicide thought form. And something that just lives off the energy of being depressed and wants to die. Now, I can do the opposite and say life is beautiful, I'm happy to be married. And eventually, if I really feel that and I pump enough energy into that, I will also create a thought form which brings that kind of energy into my life. They're basically a parasite. The very first time I think they were documented was in Tibet. They were called tulpas, I think. And it got so out of hand that it even took physical characteristics. And when the girl tried destroying it, it didn't want to die. So it was kind of like, whoa, you got to be careful with the mojo you work with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Be careful what you wish for. That's rule number one, I think, in the metaphysical, because people don't always understand that when you put something out into the universe, it sticks. You're not just putting it out and then it's going away. No, it goes to where it needs to go, and sometimes it comes back to bite us in the butt, really.
For those of you who are interested, too, in reading a bit more about the book, I invite you all to like our fan page, facebook.com/defensive occultism. If you send us a private message with your name and email address, we'll send you a teaser copy of the book just so you can enjoy it. No strings attached. That's all you got to do. So that's for our listeners out there.
All right. I'm typing that in the chat room right now.
Thank you very much.
And one of the things about the book, which is kind of wonderfully fascinating, is the fact that it's not a book that you need to sit down and pretend you're doing your homework and sit and read it from cover to cover to get anything out of it. It's one of those books that you can look yourself up, whatever problem, whatever issue, whatever, pick a page, read the chapter, read the part that has to do with it. And that really is kind of a wonderful thing, not to sit there and worry that you have to read this whole book. It would be good if you did, but the point is, if you have something going on in your life that you really need to find out about quickly, it's right there. So I want to thank you for doing it that way.
Yeah, well, I want to make it as easy as possible because especially in this country, there aren't too many authors who write on the topic, and a lot of them are basically books about anecdotes, which can only be so helpful. The idea of coming out with the book was just to make it as easy for anyone to do it, from a person who knows nothing about the occult to a person who's been practicing it for 10 years. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's why I actually added the whole, the illustrations to it. Just make it fun, make it as digestible as possible. Because I've had my experiences with occult books where they literally made my nose bleed because they were just too deep. It was like, oh my gosh, these guys.
I've had a couple of those to read for my show before, and I go knocking at Tim, I can't read this, I can't understand, I'm an idiot, that kind of thing. So it's very user-friendly, very, very, very handy to keep around, and it doesn't weigh 50 pounds. It's easy to carry with you. Go to his facebook.com, Defensive Occultism, and check it out, like it, and send him a note, private message. All right, so let's talk about spiritual emergencies. Now, what exactly are they?
Okay. The spiritual emergency is what I call the reverse of the spiritual emergence. Now, as a practitioner, Marla, I'm willing to bet that that the tide is more and more people are awakening now. 10 years ago, it was still kind of hush-hush to be into the occult. While now, more and more people are like, hey, this is something I'm getting drawn to. People are discovering that they have intuition, they have psychic abilities, they have manifestational abilities, they can hear spirits, they can see spirits. These are all great. These are what we call spiritual emergences. Now, it becomes a spiritual emergency when the individual cannot control it. It's like a bad mutant from the X-Men. In other words, this person's having sixth sense syndrome. It's like they can't control their psychic vision. They feel crazy because they see spirits all over the place. Or they're just really out of control or out of touch with their own abilities. Now, when this happens, the individuals end up becoming more of a detriment to society than boon to it. And usually we, especially in our community, we try to seek people out like that because we'd like to guide them as much as we can so that they can understand their talents. Because these people are usually very afraid. I mean, it's like I don't know if you remember the show Heroes. It's a really cool show from back in the day. Too bad I took it down. But like a lot of people who woke up and all of a sudden they had these abilities. They didn't know what to make of it. Yeah, cool if it's something like helpful that make you teleport. But if it turned you into water out of nowhere, I'd be pretty freaked out as well. Now, it's not as extreme, but if you could sense people's thoughts and you can't control it, that could be a bit unnerving, and that's when the spiritual emergency comes into play.
Mm-hmm. So you do a lot of occult investigations, and how do they differ between paranormal investigations?
Well, what I call occult investigation is like the midway point between psychic investigation and paranormal investigation. I have nothing but the highest respect for both. But if you go too far in the spectrum in one, especially in this country, psychic investigation is very popular. You have this person walking around the house and they said, oh, look, there's a demon there, there's a dwarf there, and there's a fairy here. Good, very good. You can sense these things. But nowadays, people want proof. Okay, people want to say, hey, maybe you're just pulling my chain, or maybe you're going to ask for $600 to get rid of them. So on the other hand, you have the paranormal investigation where you got the guys like Ghost Adventures who've got all the great gadgets and stuff like that. And that's a lot of fun too. But the thing with that is the gadgets can only go so far. I mean, I can say that, yeah, the ghost hunters can come around with their EMF meters, because even I have one, digital thermometers. But if you're dealing with a thought form, it's not going to be picked up with the gear. If you're dealing with a curse, you're not going to pick this up either. If you're dealing with a person who's astrally projecting, it's also not going to be picked up. The paranormal investigation gear is usually good for ghosts. So occult investigation is basically what I call the combination of both. And an added factor that we can also use supernatural means as part of the investigation. So I try to mix the two together so that we have something that is more of a synthesis than a thesis or an antithesis.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm trying to figure out a way to word this, but taking the population, let's say everybody that's listening to the show now, today.
Yeah.
How many people do you think experience spiritual emergencies in general?
Emergency or included with emergence?
Well, I think the emergences is, like you said, it's more common and people are accepting that. But are there a lot more people that are in trouble because of that awakening?
I'd like to say it's a growing number. But the thing is, there's hope for them. Because again, imagine out of nowhere, when you just discover you have a gift or you have a calling, you have ability to hear spirits, and there's no one there to guide you, no one there to talk to, no one there to consult with or to help you come to terms. That can be very scary. So if you're saying, based upon the number of listeners or like the average population of people who have this, more than we give ourselves credit for. But the thing is, they don't want to come forward most of the time because the first thing they'll say is, I don't want people to think I'm crazy, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a growing phenomenon, and we're probably going to see more of it in the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like people that don't exactly know how to handle it are getting more in trouble with it because they're opening doors that or portals, whatever, that they don't realize they're doing. So again, it goes back to education. If you have a gift, work with it, learn about it, nurture it. But, like a lot of people that go out on paranormal investigations do it for the wrong reasons. I believe that just because we can go out and investigate paranormal phenomena, not everybody should. I mean, even in standard investigations, there are hidden dangers that many don't even think about, or they believe that nothing can happen to them. They're bulletproof. But what do you say to people who think it's just something to do for fun, any of this, because people on TV do it all the time?
Well, I'd actually say that better safe than sorry. Example, if you're going to even dare do a paranormal investigation, if this is something you really want to do, it's a great thing to do at times, but sometimes you find more than what you're looking for. Hold on. The way I see it is, if you're going to go looking for paranormal stuff, stick with the ghosts, okay? If you hear, example, hey, I heard a story of this kid who's possessed down the road, leave that stuff away. Don't even bother with that. More importantly, like, oh, I heard that there's this person, this witch who lives around the corner. I don't think you want to mess with that kind of person either. So if you're doing a paranormal investigation, just focus on the ghost huntings. You know what I mean? If it sounds too dangerous for your pay grade, leave it alone.
Okay, let's talk about witches for a second, because you just kind of intimated that stay away from the witches because, you don't know anything about them.
Example, nothing against witches. I mean, or like there's this guy practicing magic around the corner. I don't think I'd want to mess with a guy like that. I mean, witches are great people.
Okay, just checking. Just, wondering because, again, witches always get the bad rap and the negativity. And, should people be cautious? Well, not if they're friendly, normal people. No. There's no problem. But just like anyone, you can walk up to a dog and smack it upside the head. The dog's going to bite back at you. It's just the way you treat people. So just curious about that. But one of the other things that you talk about in the book is your experiences with the infernal. Now, can you explain what that is and how you deal with it?
Well, that's already an area that I wouldn't even dare recommend any of the viewers to work with, because usually there are no winners there. From my own belief system, there are in fact demonic entities that are outside grimoire magic. All right. I personally believe in a evil force, like example, what the Christians call hell. I believe in that, but I believe in a completely different way. However, they have their own agenda. Their agenda is pretty much to corrupt humankind and prevent it from reaching its potential divinity. Now, what I've observed with it is that they can play very, very insidiously and nefariously with people against one another. And the more I've studied on the book, preparing for that chapter, the more problems I had finishing the book. So, believe it or not, I don't know if you've noticed, the book is pretty much 92% complete, not even 100%, because I felt that there was this looming force that just did not want parts of this book to come out. And up to now, I'm even having trouble with that book, simply just to sell it, because it's like, wow, they're really trying to twist my arm. Now, my own experiences with it is, if you can leave it alone, just leave it alone. It's nothing that you want to just jump into things. Like, in a case of possession, there's usually no winners. So if that's your cup of tea, just make sure you have a lot of faith. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, no, I don't recommend people getting involved with that either, because there's just, there is a yin and a yang. There is a light and a dark. And the better you stay away from the dark side, the better it's going to be for you. I mean, because not very many people, I can't say nobody, but not very many people are equipped to deal with things like demons and possessions and things like that. Now, for a very long time, a lot of people have said that there has been a rise in demonic sightings and stuff. A lot of people say no, because you don't know the difference between a demon and a grumpy spirit kind of thing.
But I can tell now.
Huh?
I think I can tell a difference now between a demon and a grumpy spirit.
Well, a lot of people just don't, though. I mean, anything that is the least bit negative must be a demon. And I know my listeners aren't like that, but I've heard a lot of people, that go out and investigate, oh, we got a demon here and 7 demons there and 52 demons around the corner. And, I mean, in truth, I don't believe that there is a demon lurking around every corner, but I do believe that there, as you said, elementals that kind of get ticked off. There are spirits that are actually, grumpy, as above, as below. Same thing. So do you actually buy into the thing that that demonics and this whole negative thing is on the rise, like some people believe?
I believe that it's a big enough of a concern that the Vatican themselves had to open exorcism classes, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. I mean, the thing with Catholicism, and believe it or not, call me a hypocrite, I'm still a Catholic, they don't want to admit to anything demonic unless it's so blatant that they can no longer admit it. And the fact that they've actually said, hey, we need to start training more exorcists is it's really mud in their eye, because it's like saying, oh, but I thought you guys said there weren't really any demons. So it is on the rise, but I don't think of it that like everywhere you go in every liquor store there's a demon. I kind of like to equate demons to the terrorists of the astral world, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are stupid people out there, there are dumb people out there, but they're not exactly terrorists. So it's like every time you meet somebody who like gives you the finger, not necessarily a terrorist, maybe a jerk, but not a terrorist.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, okay, it's kind of like the good overrules the bad in numbers at least, but sometimes the bad can be very, very bad.
Yes, and very much.
You have to watch out for. Now, also, one of the things that you talked about in the book was the Ouija and demonic possession, and you say that this is one of the most subtle means of possession. Now, the Ouija board is just one of hundreds of forms of divination. So do you believe that all forms of divination, even the common ones, such as maybe a pendulum or tarot cards, can open a Pandora's box?
No, I'm a tarot card reader as well, and if that were the case, then I'm very much sold to the demonic world already. The thing with the Ouija, because I'm just coming from a documented point of view here, and because possession is one of my passion studies. I really love to study it. I want to understand, especially how it occurs unwillingly. There's something about the spontaneousness to it. Now, of course, if there's 8 people playing a Ouija board in a room, maybe you'll hear a couple things fall in the room. But when it's a person playing the Ouija board alone, sometimes the individual is too open. Do you know what I mean? That they're like, please give me an answer. And they're literally lowering their defenses. Now, if there is something malignant in the area, that can be a jump spot. Something can actually jump in because you're literally opening yourself up to it. Now, in the case of the tarot cards, though, or the pendulum, it's not as extreme because you're not necessarily begging the universe for an answer. You can just simply interpret the way the pendulum moves or the tarot cards that come out. Now, with the Ouija, you're pretty much just saying, hey, I need an answer here. Please give me this answer. And in cases, that can be very detrimental. But that's not just the only practice that does that. There's even forms of Chinese Tai Chi that have actually also been documented to lead to possession because it's too spontaneous. So the point I'm getting at is the least control you have over the divinatory method, like if you open yourself up too much to it, then you're kind of opening yourself up to a potential entry point. So it's better to be careful.
Okay, because we've talked about this. I know Reverend Tim and I have from time to time about Ouijas and things. And I think he'll agree with me that we kind of believe that it's not the Ouija board that's the bad thing. It's people that don't know how to use it, don't know how to do protection, don't know what they're doing, other than treating it as a parlor game, which in that case it can be a little bit detrimental. But I don't, personally, I don't think the Ouija board is a horrible thing if you know how to use it, if you're doing it under the right conditions, if you're doing it for light and not darkness, that kind of thing. Because any tool can be dangerous if the person using it doesn't know what they're doing or uses it badly. Don't you agree?
Well, I guess I'm inclined to agree with you there. I guess it's the utter surrender of yourself to the tool that's the problem. And I guess when it came to the Ouija board, that was the most common cause of, demonic infestation was because they were too open to it. I haven't seen anybody become too open to their tarot cards. I mean, they can actually say, no, I'm not understanding this. I can always draw another card. There's an aspect of control there. With the Ouija, though, sometimes when you surrender too much of yourself, maybe that's where the problem lies.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense. Well, I had a guest on several years ago that talked about runes, and she believed that the runes were alive. And they were kind of controlling her. So that is probably a good example of what you just said about not opening up so much to them that you start believing things that, I'm not saying it isn't possible because I never say never in this world, you don't dare. But, the chances of the runes being alive, sure they have an essence. But I don't know. I think that was just kind of taking it just a little bit to the extreme.
True, I agree. There's even some practice. There's some practices here. I dare not mention their name, but they're very spontaneous forms of expression spiritually. And I've noticed that a lot of negative energy tends to build up around them, even though the practice itself is very beautiful. And I wonder why. And think of it like this: if you're going to keep your car unlocked, like say you leave the keys of your car inside the ignition and the door is unlocked, you don't need to worry about the good people stealing your car. You need to worry about the bad people, if you know what I mean. So in that case, it's similar to these very spontaneous forms of action that you surrender too much of yourself, that good spirits won't jump in without being called because they are good spirits, while the negative ones, they're the ones who want to do joyrides and jump into you. So that's the danger there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of like be careful what sandbox you play in, right?
True, true.
Yeah, because otherwise, you get kicked sand in your face. Do you find that there is a cultural difference, and you've touched on this a little bit, about the beliefs in the Philippines as opposed to, say, here in the States? I mean, you've been in both places, you've lived in both areas. Is there a major difference between the thought processes about the metaphysical?
Well, yes, because deeply ingrained into the culture of this country is a spiritual ideology. Especially, it's a very shamanic spiritual ideology. And it only kind of got snuffed when Catholicism landed their ships and started saying everything was work of the devil. So the thing is, no matter what we do in this country, it's always in the back of our mind. It's in our blood. While in the States, although it's kind of like there's so many competing forms of thinking that most people start off with science. It's like, okay, great, but science doesn't have all the answers. So the difference in cultural thinking is we are inclined here already to the spiritual. It's part of our nature. Even politicians here go to spiritual advisors on a regular basis. While in the States, due to the prevalence of science, technology, things like that, the immediate way of thinking there is basically skeptical, and you've actually got to convince these people to be open to things before they actually get into things. Not to take anything away from Americans as well. I mean, I'm also an American, but this was just my observation that, like, in this country, almost everyone believes in ghosts, believe it or not. People are not skeptical here. While there, you'd have skeptics just because there's no scientific proof. So it's kind of like a balance of things.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's good to be skeptical to some degree. Cynical is the bad word for me, because you can never teach a cynic anything. A skeptic, especially an open-minded skeptic, will listen. And, that's all we can ever ask of anybody is just listen. You don't have to believe, you don't have to whatever, but hear it, because there's two sides to every coin. So I think the healthy skepticism is a good thing in some ways.
Of course.
Well, in most ways. But it's just those closed-minded people, and I think it's the closed-minded people that, well, okay, I'm going to say it. I think closed-minded people basically, in some ways, are very negative.
True.
Because they aren't open to anything except what they believe to be true. Now, that is good for them, but it probably has a bad effect generally. What do you think?
Yeah, because like this, you cannot believe, example, in Jesus for all I care, but a closed-minded person will not approve of another person believing in Jesus. It's like, if you want to have your own beliefs, keep them to yourself, but the minute you start attacking my beliefs, that's when we have kind of a squabble coming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about Mysterium Philippines.
Well, Mysterium Philippines started with a vision. Okay, we noticed that there was a lot of potential in this country to teach, but there were not a lot of places to learn. There was a lot of potential for people to develop their skills because, like we're a naturally spiritual country. But we were hearing conflicting stories. One, we started as a magazine. We wanted to just have a free quarterly publication, and we'd get writings from people around the country, people who we knew were genuine practitioners. Because I think you know what a charlatan is, and they exist here too. So we gathered the documents together. We put up the publication, and we got massive feedback from it. People started asking, "Oh, when are you going to start having courses? When are you going to start, giving classes?" So eventually we moved to the capital and we put up Mysterium Philippines. It started as a magazine and it became an organization. Then we opened our classes early in 2008. And since then, it's just been education. We want people to have a very strong foundation in their esoteric education if they want to learn from us. So we teach them the basics of psychic development, the basics of tarot, the basics of magic. And when they finish the basic courses, they can advance to further topics like Reiki, shamanism, astral projection, ceremonial magic. We like to tell our students that your practice is your own, but there will always be fundamentals that you'll need to maximize your practice.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that it's more popular in the Philippines? I mean, that there's much more interest because people are more into it, for lack of a better term?
Actually, no. That's where you have the advantage because Catholicism here has always been a claw around the throat of intellectuals. And people will admit they're into it, but they want to do it behind closed doors. It's kind of like everything here is closet case. Nobody wants to come out into the open and admit that, oh, I'm practicing magic. And if you do, people are afraid of the flack you get from it. So at least in the States, you're protected by civil liberties. Nobody can, example, fire you for being a Wiccan because you can take them to court and sue them for millions of dollars. Here, the lawmakers, the president, they're still Catholic, and the church still has some arm-twisting power here. So we're trying to encourage people, if this is who you are, accept it. We'll always stand by you. We have communities, but we haven't reached that level yet where people can, example, we just met, oh yeah, would you like your tarot cards read? It's very rare that can happen.
Are there like witch hunts there in the sense, and I don't mean not to witches, but I mean in the literal, not the literal term of the word, but are there people out there that will go after people if they think that they're at all involved in the metaphysical?
Yes, especially in the lower provinces of the country, because the country is divided into 3 regions, Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. In the Luzon area, especially where Manila is, it's already kind of getting more up to date. But the lower provinces, you still have bishops who can pull the strings of schools, having people kicked out of school. They can always they come into little religious communities. It's almost not unlike the Bible Belt area of the U.S., if you know what I mean. So it's not like they necessarily come out with pitchforks and stuff, but they'll make life difficult for you. Like, we heard and here's the sad part too. If you're practicing any form of occultism, you're already satanic. So that's the way they think. You hear you worship the devil. We don't want to serve you in our establishment. I'm like, wow. It's like, okay.
Well, we kind of have that too. I mean, there's still a lot of people that believe that witches are devil spawn, and we do the bidding of the devil and all that. And there will people never be convinced otherwise because we have thousands of years of bad press. And so it's a little bit like that too. A lot of witches here, and I've told this story before. One of the people on my team, Victoria Gross, when we met, I knew her as a medium. And she was out on the team when I was writing my Ghosts of Hollywood books, and as in the capacity of a medium, because I always believe on a paranormal investigation, I like to have a medium. I don't think equipment is enough, like you said earlier. So, we were kind of like looking at each other really weirdly for about 2 or 3 weeks, going to all these places, doing this and that. And I think we both had an inkling that each other was a witch. But still, in our culture, you don't just jump up and say, hey, I'm a witch. Hey, you don't wear the pentacle and rub it in anybody's face. And we didn't do anything about it. I mean, neither of us said anything, but we were at an investigation at the Hollywood Wax Museum. And there was one area that you go through that Victoria actually was leading into it, and she told everybody to stop because it felt very, very heavy, very negative. And she immediately stepped in there and did the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram. And, in my mind, the light bulb goes on. I go, aha! She's a witch.
Oh, well. Anybody who knows is a basic practitioner.
Yeah. And so, I didn't say anything right then and there, but, the next day we were talking on the phone, and I said, all right, come out of the broom closet. Come on, you are a witch, yes? And she goes, yeah, and you are too. I've known it, So it's not something that we're still flaunting. It's still, if people see me wearing a pentagram around my neck, they freak out. They immediately think of Satanism. They don't understand, what the 5 points stand for, the elements, and they're always looking to see if it's upside down. And, it's still crazy. It's not an easy thing to be a witch in this day and age, even in an enlightened society, much less in one that isn't.
Well, I pray for the day that it actually does materialize, because, we're people nonetheless, and I think all of us are getting tired of being called devil spawn. We're not exactly, in most cases, we're not even doing any harm, so it's like, the stereotype's got to end eventually.
Do you think it ever will? Because I'm not so sure.
I think it will. Well, in your country, like I said, in America, the beauty of it is if somebody fired you for being a witch, that's a lot of money in your pocket. You could really throw the book at them for religious persecution. In this country, not yet.
Okay. All right.
Because, like, people get more enlightened. I see it happening, but probably when I'm 70 or so.
Well, at least you won't be burned at the stake as your way out, right?
Hopefully not.
All right. So where can people find out more about you? And are your classes only in person in the Philippines? Do you do anything online or?
Well, if you want to learn more about us, you can go to mysteriumphilippines.org. We will be launching some online correspondence courses this year. Basically, we will be having webinars using Skype or other modules for our psychic development course. And for our tarot course, we will be using an online module as well. So if they just keep following us there or at facebook.com, Mysterium Philippines fan page, you can at least know if there's things coming to life. If you want to learn more about me, you can just pretty much, follow Defensive Occultism, facebook.com/Defensive Occultism. Or you can just send us an email addressed to Rob at mysteriumphilippines at yahoo.com.
And where can people get your book?
It's available on Kindle right now. We're just having a tricky time shipping it from here to the States because we got to do it in bulk or else it's going to cost an arm and a leg every time we do it. So if you're interested in buying it, it's on Kindle for $7. If not, if you want a dead tree version, you can email us and say that you're interested in purchasing a copy. And with additional shipping, of course, we can have a copy shipped to you.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining me tonight. It was a terrific book. It was very interesting in a lot of places. It covered just about everything that I could think of, and it's a fascinating subject. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Stay on the line after we get off, and we will thank you properly. And in the meantime, guys, as usual, I want to thank you all for tuning in tonight. And please join me next week. It's going to be really interesting. My guest will be medium and spirit artist Courtney Kimmick. Now, spirit art is something that I've always been fascinated about and always wanted to see somebody actually doing it. And since I happen to live in a house that's very, very active, Courtney's actually coming over this weekend. So I'll get to see her at work firsthand and hopefully find out who might be hanging around this place. And it'll give us a lot to talk about on the show next week. So until next time, everybody, join us then. And blessed be and merry meet again. Good night.
This has been another edition of Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks. Be sure to tune in next week at the same time for another great guest and more fun. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2009.
You have been listening to the Para X Radio Network.